Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? I wanted to yell to say, hey, good morning, everybody. It is March 1st, Wednesday, March 1st, not the other kind of March 1st. Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. There are some other Wednesday, March 1sts out there, probably in our archives. We could look it up. You can figure it out if you know the mathematical formula or something like that. But this one is special because it's the one happening right now. It's the one we have to think about. It's top of mind. That's not really any kind of a reason, but happy March, everybody. We are, 2 weeks away from the Ides of March, which is the most famous Ides of all of them, thanks to William Shakespeare, as I understand it. So, okay, that's great news. Plenty of things happening, not that I know any of them. The story I have this morning, as far as I'm concerned, what's burning up the wires on social media, it's really difficult to say that it's burning up the wires on Mastodon, both because that's not really the way the Mastodon thing works, and because it's really not. But at any rate, it's so much easier. It used to make sense to say it's burning up the wires on Twitter because everybody was there, but now everybody's running away. But this news, I wasn't aware either. Buzz Anderson has this to say. I don't know Buzz Anderson, but I should get to know him because this is fantastic. This is interesting. He says, was not aware of Ron DeSantis's time at Guantanamo Bay. Now, of course, this was not the way it should be with Ron DeSantis as a prisoner at Guantanamo Bay, but rather, I'm sure as a member of Congress, maybe during his time at as governor, I don't know, may have at some point visited, but my guess is that it was probably in his time in Congress, visiting Guantanamo Bay. And of course, according to this prisoner's story, and I'm sure there will be, it won't dent Ron DeSantis' fan base much because they either won't believe the word of a prisoner, or they'll somehow take this incident to be some sort of a badge of honor, a wet, sloppy, horrible badge of honor. But, they'll make it into a badge of honor nonetheless. This comes from Harper's.org and Harper's Magazine, which, as I recall, is usually paywalled, so I might not be able to read the story. But, I don't know. Well, it's here. It says, the header is, See No Evil, is, I guess, the title of the piece. What's the date on this? It just says, it's an excerpt from a podcast from a November discussion, is when it was originally done. I don't know whether this is being published now, on the Eyes Left podcast between Mike Prisner, which I assume is pronounced Prisner, as opposed to Prisoner, Prysner. It would be just two on the nose for Mike Prisner. It would be an Iraq war veteran, and Mansour Adayfi, which we anglicize as Adayfi, a former detainee at Guantanamo Bay, who tells this story that over the inhumane treatment there, many of the prisoners went on a hunger strike in 2005, and there was force feeding, which he says is itself torture. And you can believe this. And he says, he retells this story in this way. I'll clean it up a little bit for family radio. I saw a effing handsome person come in. Effing handsome. How's that for a compliment there, Ron DeSantis? And he said, I'm here to ensure that you are treated humanely. And Mike Prisner says, it was Ron DeSantis? He asks, was it Ron DeSantis? And, I must have heard the story already and understood it to be Ron DeSantis. And then there is an asterisk to that. Why is that asterisked? Does it say later somewhere else? I guess, is this a link? I might as well open up. The office of Ron DeSantis did not respond to requests for comment. That's all it says. Well, anyway, so the claim is that it's Ron DeSantis. And, at any rate, the excerpt that is circulated via Mastodon was Adayfi saying, yes, and Ron DeSantis was there watching us. We were crying, screaming. We were tied to the feeding chair, and he was watching. He was laughing, and that does sound a little bit like Ron DeSantis. Might be our stomachs could not hold this amount of Ensure. That's how they were force feeding them with the tube and pouring Ensure, the product. I'm sure that they are very happy to be associated with the torture. Don't know whether they have any recourse there. They poured one can after another. So when he approached me, I said, "This is the way we're treated." And he said, "You should eat." And then the interesting part, I threw up in his face, literally on his face. And Preisner asked, "Ron DeSantis?" And the answer, in his face. Yeah. So I guess you could take some small comfort from the fact that the guy who went to Guantanamo Bay to laugh at prisoners being tortured got vomited on in his face. That's something. That's the second story I've heard in all my days of a horrible, awful person, member of Congress, getting vomited on, or at least getting vomit on them. The other one being the famous story once told on Howie Klein's blog, Down with Tyranny, of St. Patrick's Day revelry overcoming the otherwise, I'm sure, redoubtable Michelle Bachmann, the 1L Michelle Bachmann. One L, two crazy eyes, as we call her, Michelle Bachmann, who also, I guess, overindulging perhaps on St. Patrick's Day, or perhaps just a coincidence and had a stomach bug and threw up in one of the ladies' room floors in the Capitol, at which point, the story goes, good old Mean Gene Schmidt, the Evel Knievel twin, who once briefly served in Congress, now still serves in the Ohio state legislature, as I understand it, came in, stepped in it, I guess, and slipped and fell, and, right into stuff. And Howie Klein, of course, described that with the line that has stuck with me ever since, "How unpleasant for the vomit that must have been." All right. Well, a similar end. Probably the vomit had no idea it was going to end up on Ron DeSantis' face, but it's probably pretty proud of itself. So how's that for the start of the of a March, a new month? Well, there's other stories. Luckily, that's why Greg Dworkin is here, but also to try and make me stop telling this story. All right. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine. So
Good.
You made me go look up George H.W. Bush vomiting at the banquet thrown by the Japanese prime minister.
Yes, that's true. That's right. But that was not an American politician that got it on them. But that's a good story that, we should build our portfolio. I mean, if you include the entire world, it's probably happening a lot.
I think that would be a great story for Tuesday.
Yeah, or Friday might be another good day for that one. Or, for that matter, keep it to yourself on a Saturday.
Or Saturday, yep. Might be. In any case, since you brought it up.
Ron DeSantis, bleh. Yes.
Yeah, since you brought it up,
right.
let's just
this guy brought it
Ron
up.
DeSantis.
Yeah.
Yeah, he brought it. So
it all came up, yes.
The thing is that Ron DeSantis has had a reasonably good run over the last month or so, whereby he's been in the news. People have been talking about him.
Commenting
There's been
on
all
him.
these focus groups. Well, if you don't want Trump, then would you go with DeSantis? And what do you think about him? And this, that, and everything else. But the poor guy doesn't do well when you actually examine who he is. Yeah. And, you have to talk to him personally because, he's such
a die-fee. Yeah, holy cow.
It's kind of a jerk, And so this is Blake Allen reporting. 4 new polls show Trump bump, extending lead over DeSantis. Emerson, Trump 55, DeSantis 25. Yahoo, Trump 47, DeSantis 39. Echelon, Trump 46, DeSantis 31. Fox News, Trump 43, DeSantis 28. All show improvement for Trump over the last month. And there's a story about it from Axios, our friend Josh Kraushaar, who writes there now. Why it matters. A good thing about Axios is it always tells you why it matters.
Yes, right. They think so.
Yeah, why it matters. After a shaky start to his presidential campaign, Trump has quietly found his footing over the last month. His visit to the derailment in East Palestine. He's doing campaign stops for ice cream and not just doing the mega rallies. And so, he's just he's there. And the people running against him are afraid to take him on. DeSantis won't. Nikki Haley won't. And the bottom line is the beginning of the 2024 campaign is feeling similar to 2016 when Trump's GOP rivals just assumed he would automatically fade without them having to do anything. And it doesn't work that way. And Ron DeSantis as a campaign may have some strategic goals here. Let's go to Staten Island and New York City and show the people who vote for cops that we're tough, and maybe we'll get some of that Trump vote. But, it's going to be very difficult if you refuse to even mention Trump's name to run against him. And it's not at all clear DeSantis has the political skills to pull this off, and the polling reflects that. So he may have peaked, in other words. And as you start to take a look at him and hear stories about this and other stories about what he did in Congress and how that's different from what he says now, he was totally for it before he was against it, kind of thing. So, it's to the point where Josh Marshall, actually in his newsletter, the Dispatch, said, look, just, and if it's too long and if you don't get the newsletter, it's pretty simple. Ignore the noise. It's still Trump's nomination to lose.
Okay.
So, Ron DeSantis, whatever,
Yeah, right. And, I don't feel so good now that you said his name. Okay.
Well, are you bringing it up again? So the thing here is the entire MAGA movement, the conservative movement, is sort of in trouble politically.
Yeah, good.
You're looking at the individual states. We've covered this pretty extensively, like Michigan. Oh, and by the way, in Michigan, there's an opening for senator.
Oh, yeah.
And, remember Elise Slotkin?
Yes, I remember. I got that
right. The one that
now.
you can get confused with Elaine Stefanik from New York?
That's terrible.
Okay. The ESs.
Embarrassing, yes.
Well, when Tudor Dixon was running for governor, the big marquee race in Michigan, between the time she announced and the time the primaries hit, she raised $2 million for herself.
Well, all right.
Okay.
Pretty
good. And Elise Slotkin raised $1.2 million in the first day of campaigning.
Well, that's pretty, I don't know. I can tell you, there's a lot of money floating around out there, everybody.
There is. But, it's the point there is Slotkin hasn't, completely cleared the field yet, but she's doing fine.
Yeah.
And you have a Michigan party that, as we talked about the other day, doesn't have any donors, can't raise money, has people who believe in demons running the place.
Yeah.
And the Democrats are lining themselves up pretty well. Similar in Arizona. The Democrats have their own troubles in Nevada with not Jackie Rosen, who's an excellent candidate and an incumbent, but with a party that is split between the Bernie people and the Harry Reid machine. Still, when you step back and look at it, it's a bad map for the Democrats because they have to defend so many seats, but at the same time, they're going to have better candidates and they're going to be running against Republican state parties that are in bad shape. And that's worth mentioning in the context of Trump and DeSantis, because it's sort of cute and interesting to look to see that nationally Trump is doing this, that, and everything else against DeSantis. But just like with the Electoral College, it's really a state-by-state race, so that sort of doesn't matter. The fact that Trump and DeSantis are 20 points apart in the polls, there isn't a national primary.
That's true, too.
It's how does DeSantis do in Florida? Pretty well. How does he do in South Carolina? Unclear.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yes, right. Well, we do divide up our election that way, and it's kind of weird, and you shouldn't forget it. But yeah, national polls, that's the early phase of the race. That's all you get.
Meanwhile, let's mention CPAC.
Oh, yeah.
Conservative Political Action Conference, it's called.
They do this like every week.
And there's no annual CPAC conference. As somebody pointed out, CPAC has a conference like every 5 days.
Yes, it does feel like there's no real schedule to it.
But the problem for them is that on the one hand, they like to make news and attract all the nutcases and have the craziest people come and, present to them and thereby make news. But the head of CPAC, Matt Schlapp, is like in big trouble. So this is the Washington Post. CPAC's head faces sexual assault claim.
That's it.
Other leadership concerns emerge. Matt Schlapp, who runs the Conservative Political Action Conference, has been backed by prominent Republicans, but some staffers complain of the group's culture. So With CPAC readying to welcome Trump back to its flagship annual gathering in D.C. this week, Schlapp's facing multiple challenges, including the exodus of more than half its staff since 2021. Some expressed concern that Schlapp is like reading about an NRA board meeting.
Oh, yeah?
Some expressed concern that Schlapp has given an inexperienced contractor too much influence. One former employee notified the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission last month of plans to sue whoever claims she was fired in retaliation for complaining about a coworker's sexist and racist comments. Toxic culture, said the former communication director, Regina Bratton, in an interview. From my perspective, he acted like a bully. So there's corporate backlash over its embrace of the far right, concerns about a potentially lackluster turnout this year as Trump's political future appears uncertain. Fox Nation streaming service is not returning as a sponsor. They've got their own issues, which I think we're going to cover.
Yes, right.
And Ron DeSantis is skipping it.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize he was. Okay.
Well, he's not going to compete with Trump over an event that Trump has sort of owned.
I think that would be unwise. But I don't know. Do something unwise.
Well, look, if you're trying to run against Trump, then showing up at a conference that has been in the past devoted to him and at the same time trying to distinguish yourself from him, that's a bad move. It's a no-win situation. What's he supposed to do?
Yeah.
If he takes him on directly, they'll boo him. And if he doesn't take him on directly, he looks weak. So why go?
Yeah, not much of a space there for him. Although there's you just sit back and let it happen. If it's the case that Trump doesn't perform the way he used to at CPAC anymore, then you just kind of sit back and let that happen and laugh from a distance, as opposed to be on the spot and capitalize on it. And I don't know. It might not transfer to you. You might just let him take the spotlight and screw it up himself. Yeah, maybe that's the wise move. Also, you should get some of those big white plastic boots and wear those stomping around.
So here's a quote. CPAC used to feel like you were part of something that really mattered. What conservatism means, said Ross Heminger, who worked for Schlapp when he first became ACU chairman, American Conservative Union. Yeah. It's gotten so nutty, it's a pep rally for Trumpism with Schlapp as the captain of the cheer squad.
Captain Schlapp.
Captain Schlapp. And that's what it's like when you see him on TV. He's just like, don't give me facts. I'm just going to give you nonsense. It's like listening to one of Trump's press secretaries. So it's not like it's an independent organization any more than Fox News is an independent organization.
That's true too.
And it's so weird to have all this stuff exposed finally.
Yeah, it's great, and it's interesting that lawsuits were the platform to do it, and that's a great thing. It's a difficult thing sometimes to be able to drag somebody into a position where they feel compelled to tell the truth. And I'm still astonished that Rupert Murdoch didn't just risk lying his ass off in his deposition, but he didn't. I don't know. They're afraid of perjury, which is weird. I don't know why that worries them so much.
Right. And here's another thing about Fox, to segue into that a little bit, which we hadn't mentioned, but, it was sort of kind of interesting. I don't know if you heard, but Howard Kurtz, who does media reporting for, wait for it, Fox News.
Right. Yes. He moved there. Yeah. Okay.
Said Fox News won't let him talk or write about the Fox News story.
Okay, yes, that's right. I think you did. Maybe we mentioned that, or maybe I saw it in passing. Yeah, okay. Well,
Kurt Anderson writes, Howard Kurtz, your employer of 10 years, is at the center of this year's or decade's biggest story on your beat, and Fox News won't let you talk or write about it, a blackout which you strongly disagree with, and you're 69 years old. Why don't you just quit?
That's an idea. Where would he go? I don't know. Maybe
it doesn't matter. It's 69. He didn't have to go anywhere.
It's a nice age.
It's a lovely age, let me tell you.
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. Why are you doing this?
He must just love it so much.
You'd think, and so that gives you an idea of who works for Fox News. And, if you're ideologically committed, that's one thing. But, it sort of does raise all sort of interesting things. And, of course, there's more and more fallout from the Dominion lawsuit. This one is from Jessica Husman, writing in VoteBeat. It's clear there's a thing called VoteBeat. It's a beat about votes.
That's the news.
It's clearer than ever that Fox News stars lied about 2020 while local election officials told the truth. Bonus, here's how many election administrators you could pay with 1 year of Tucker Carlson's salary.
Oh.
They have that buried in there.
Okay.
So she writes, look, After a truly spicy filing this week by Dominion's attorneys, it's a weird thing to know for an absolute fact that the people lying to you knew they were lying to you at the time they did the lying. But there it is, in proof, black and white. And it's not particularly surprising. Sure, it makes sense that Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham simply lied rather than they did really believe that stuff, right? It makes a lot more sense. And it's not surprising specifically because while these people popped off on cable, there was a group of hundreds of people telling us the truth about the election in real time. They were the local and state election officials, the people who were being hounded because the hosts were giving them such a hard time.
Okay.
So she writes, it's startling to think about the amount of money that incentivizes such behavior. Tucker Carlson, who demanded a Trump debunking reporter be fired because it's measurably hurting the company and the stock price is down, makes $10 million a year for the pleasure of standing before a camera and lying about the election. Election administrators who don't have the luxury of lying to the constituents could only dream of such resources. It would cover the salary of the Brewster County, Texas election administrator 300 times over. Or the hourly salary of an elections worker in Buncombe County, North Carolina for 171 years.
That's longer than they'll probably work.
Right. And I know that journalists are usually unwilling to speculate about motivation. But in this very unique situation, we don't have to speculate at all, right? It's not even that it would be irresponsible not to speculate. You don't have to speculate. They spelled it out.
It would be irresponsible not to just read what's on the paper.
Right. Maria Bartiromo, who is probably one of the figures who's fallen the most from used to be respected and now not so much. Everybody knows she's a liar. Who invited Sidney Powell. I mean, Tucker Carlson was never respected, so he didn't have his part of fall, is what I'm saying. Who invited Sidney Powell onto her show to spout off conspiracy theories unchallenged, privately called Powell's claims kooky. Sean Hannity loved to say things on the air like everybody agreed that Dominion sucked, and apparently everybody didn't agree because he privately called Sidney Powell a effing lunatic.
Well, he's right there.
But, that's the legal process of discovery. It even provides us a why. In this case, even if it's gross, the people who make millions of dollars were concerned about ratings.
Yeah, well, that's how they make their millions.
Right. So here's the thing. So, okay, we know all of that. But this is a fascinating piece by Oliver Darcy writing at CNN for reliable sources. And I got this via newsletter. So I don't know if it's online otherwise. But Darcy, who covers the same beat as Kurtz does, but is allowed to write about it, has a piece called Complicity Through Complacency, and says the Fox Corporation board has a huge mess now, and it needs to work quickly to clean it up. And Darcy interviewed Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, renowned professor and senior associate dean for leadership studies at the Yale School of Management. Sonnenfeld told me on Tuesday, that would be yesterday, that the dramatic revelations brought to light by Dominion's $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit showing it knowingly peddled election lies are cause for serious concern that could threaten the parent company. So this is the first piece I've read that goes and says there's more than just, they have egg on their face and they look bad, because when you have no shame, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We all know that. But now they're talking about members of the Fox Corporation board failing to act to prevent misconduct, people like Paul Ryan. And warn the disclosures will result in likely shareholder lawsuits, a possible SEC investigation into deceptive practices of the board for conspiring to conceal known misconduct, and potential loss of insurance protection for the company's directors and officers.
Okay. That's building on the case. If
Sonnenfeld, who's advised hundreds of CEOs and recent U.S. presidents, said the board should take immediate action, including the removal of high-ranking personnel like Fox News chief executive Suzanne Scott. Her head should be on the chopping block now. And so that's the name to look for to see whether or not somebody actually gets fired over this. Okay. The board has a duty to remove such officials for proven misconduct, Sonnenfeld told me by email, explaining that peddling known election lies, as acknowledged in the company's own sworn testimony, damages the outlet's corporate reputation. And if the board doesn't act appropriately, it shows a failure of management oversight and jeopardizes their own directors and officers' insurance protection with such gross conscious failure of diligent management oversight. And the reason that this matters, Sonnenfeld went on to say, is that Rupert Murdoch only controls, only in scare quotes, 39% of the company. So any of the 61% of the shareholders can sue for misconduct, failure of management oversight, and conscious inadequate diligence. And, they have a case.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, so you could theoretically wrest control of Fox from the Murdochs, which,
now
fine,
that may not work
nice.
because some of the people who are otherwise in the 61% may, in fact, be in his pocket for one reason or another. But the point is, that's what you're risking by lying about the election.
That, and of course, the thing that motivated it for Tucker Carlson, I mean, that will affect the stock price, and then you could just get a shareholder derivative suit for that. We lost stock value because of your mismanagement.
Right.
So
now, one of the people on the board was, of course, Paul Ryan, and Charlie Sykes had a really interesting interview with Ryan, where he basically challenged, Ryan as to, why didn't you do anything? And Ryan's answer is basically, look, I told them I disagree with what they were doing, but I'm really, trying to support the conservative movement here.
Oh, all right.
I mean, basically admitting that Fox News is simply another arm of the Republican Party is what he's saying.
Yeah, that's unusual, but okay. I'm glad he...
So a very interesting interview. That's a separate, sort of thing. Huh. But in the latest Dominion illegal filing, it was revealed behind the scenes, Fox Corporation board member Paul Ryan pleaded with Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch to prevent Trump's bogus election claims from being broadcast. But Sonnenfeld said Ryan's actions weren't enough. In fact, he said Ryan's quiet dissent was cowardly, ineffective, and immoral, which, fits everything we know about Paul Ryan.
Yes, that's true. I mean, why didn't you stand up and speak out? Oh, well.
By silently going along with it, they're guilty of complicity through complacency, and more after the break.
That's very cute, too. A lot of alliteration. That's nice. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of par for the course for Paul Ryan, but yeah, what could he do? He's only the former Speaker of the House of the United States, House of Representatives, third ranking, et cetera, et cetera. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue examining the day's news with Greg Dworkin. Nobody has.
Well, again, I think one of the reasons this Fox stuff is so interesting is because it's awesome. The drill. Oh, they did this. That's terrible. A sternly worded letter will appear, and that's the end of it. This stuff is going to have real consequences.
Well, good. Not that I don't enjoy stern
Nobody believes
words.
it until you see it. I get all of that, but listen to some of this other stuff. Neil Minow, vice chair at Value Edge Advisors and an expert on corporate governance, told me she agreed, Nell Minow, with everything that Sonnenfeld said. Minow said that she would tell concerned board members to, quote, contact their largest shareholders to hear their suggestions for new independent directors. She also recommended Fox News immediately move to settle its case with Dominion, even if that means changing the name from News to Not News. Daily free ads 10 times a day in primetime for 10 years about the integrity and reliability of Dominion. Whatever it is, just like all right. Lose.
It really does look like they're going to, even if it doesn't happen at the summary judgment level, which is where they're sitting right now. a jury trial just makes this longer and worse, I think.
Right. So there's other stories that are similar, just, to give you an idea where this is. This is Allison Morrow reporting for CNN. Fox faces an existential threat from its multi-billion-dollar defamation cases. When damages get in the billions with a B, that can be an existential threat to a journalistic organization, even one as lucrative as Fox, said Larissa Lidsky, a constitutional law professor at the University of Florida. I'm surprised she's allowed to say that.
Yeah, right. She just got fired. Oh, well.
Well, that's,
come on up.
University of Florida isn't a public state university.
Oh, well.
So,
that doesn't matter.
She probably has a few more hours before.
That's good. Right. They're just... They're setting it on fire as we speak, but okay. At any rate, it ain't what it used to be teaching in Florida, that's for sure.
This is one of the most devastating depositions I've ever seen, CNN legal analyst Norm Eisen said on Monday. When you go beyond reporting and your chairman admits it was endorsement, then that opens you up to liability under the actual malice standard. I mean, don't forget, these are the people that told the Trump campaign about what Biden's commercials were going to look like in advance before they showed.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And I don't, there's not as much discussion of that. There has been a little bit, but.
But the point there is obviously they're taking sides.
Wow,
this one is from Mediaite. CNN media analyst says unnamed C-suite Fox executive thinks they will lose this suit.
Well, yes.
Sarah Fisher revealed, according to her source at Fox, the network's expecting to lose the defamation suit. So summary judgment, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know whether they can actually win on summary judgment because as clear as it seems, it's so much money, I would think that the judge who has to decide that would say, it's too much money for me to just say, okay, yeah, you win.
Yeah, although, I mean, they could, I don't know what the rules in the state
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have to, go true. Under the guise of, well, it depends upon what the law says.
Yeah, all right. You don't have to do that. We can do that. But, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, I mean, the judges will say, they don't even really want to do summary judgment if they don't have to, especially on something that has such a high bar. They say, well, I don't want to get this wrong. I think a jury should hear it. Or they might think, Fox is terrible. We should have a jury trial. We shouldn't even let them escape. I know that the plaintiff is asking for us to
make it last 5 years.
Yeah, right. So there is that. But, I mean, some states also, they sort of bifurcate the verdict and then the penalty phase. So they may still yet say, all right, well, we find you guilty or liable as a matter of law, and we'll let a jury decide whether or not 1.6 billion is the right number and leave it so that you can sort of split the baby that way. But yeah, I guess I'd be surprised, even though the brief is really strong. I guess I'd be surprised if they don't let it go to trial just to say, all right, well, I didn't want this in my hands. I don't see why a jury shouldn't get this case.
So maybe the best write-up of all of this comes from Charlie Pierce in Esquire.
All right.
As you might expect, Fox News told viewers what they wanted to hear instead of telling the truth. The tail was wagging the dog, and we don't have to tell you what comes out right under the tail, he says.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, I'd say the lawyers having the most fun these days are the ones handling the defamation suit. Every now and then, most recently on Monday, they get to release another tranche of documents related to the case and make Fox look like the malevolent entity it has always been. Yes. That make the elite political journalists who have stood up for them over the years look like unusually useful idiots.
Yes.
And then make the Murdochs look like the invasive predatory species they are. This is a public service of immeasurable value. The lawyers must be convulsing with laughter over whiskey and appetizers when the workday is done, assuming it ever is, because, billable hours.
Right, that too. Yeah, actually, now I'm thinking, I wonder if maybe the most likely outcome of all of this is the deposing of Murdoch from the head of the company in an effort to save it. I mean, the fact that he blurted out, they focus on his use of the word endorsement, and this is an endorsement of these conspiracy theories. I think they'll just say, the old man's lost it. He can't control his tongue under oath.
Well, fine. We'll get the Murdoch family out of the
and that may be all. That may be that's fine. I'm good with that outcome, certainly. I mean, it may be that they just say, well, our evil plan is we'll get rid of Murdoch and we'll just have a lesser known but equally evil person run the place. That's certainly a possible outcome. But
well, not if you're going to sue the board,
right?
And make them responsible.
Well, that's true. Although they can get I suppose there's an unlimited supply of evil people that they could replace them with. But there's also every chance that it all collapses.
Everybody knows what you're about.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to replace it. So Monday's release, writes Charlie, goes a long way toward validating the case made by the late Jimmy Breslin that it was a colossal blunder to grant Rupert Murdoch American citizenship back in 1986. Breslin called Murdoch a rich urchin truckled to by New York politicians who fall down when they get a glimpse of his money. It's really too bad, he said, Breslin didn't live to see this.
Yes. Well, okay, you can only live so long.
Right.
Which really
so
should
the part
be true
I really
of Rupert
liked
Murdoch, too.
is when he wrote, in some ways it's comforting to realize that Fox's malfeasance was based on pure greed, overwhelming venality, and a frantic desire to maintain its audience. Those at least are motivations we can all understand, rather than some unfathomable, twisted ideological dementia afflicting an entire television network. But in all other ways, the revelations have given us a window into how Fox prefers to be greedy, venal, and frantic rather than to cease pumping out the poison that even some of its own executives believe to be damaging American democracy.
Yes.
Nobody wants Trump as an enemy, Murdoch is quoted as saying in his deposition, later elaborating that we all know Trump has a big following. If pieces don't watch Fox News, maybe some don't.
Yes. And that's clearly been true.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he finishes with, there's a Bible verse about a brood of vipers that comes immediately to mind.
No.
Or maybe it's, it's that Trump poem about the snake. Who knows?
Oh, he loves that. I don't even know what it is, but he loves talking about it.
Something like that,
All right.
Or, the scorpion and the turtle. There's all sorts of stuff, but, what goes around comes around. All I can say about that.
Well, it's about time.
So here's an area that I know very little about, but I'll tell you just in terms of news. Lori Lightfoot will not be mayor of Chicago this time around.
Oh, yeah. Right.
There was an election yesterday, and the white guy, the Democratic adjacent Paul Vallis, who is strongly endorsed by the police unions, came in first, 33.8%. Second was Brandon Johnson, who's endorsed by the teachers' unions. 20.3. Lori Lightfoot was in third at 17.1, and then everybody else. And everybody else includes, 6 other people who got enough votes amongst them to keep Lightfoot out of the top 2. So there'll be a runoff in April. Vallis has to be considered the favorite since he beat Johnson here by 13, 14 points. And, it's a weird situation, but the consensus from Chicago watchers is that Lightfoot put together a coalition to win, but early on lost the never really totally supportive black vote. And then with crime lost the white vote to Vallis. And, if you have a coalition and all the members of your coalition decide they don't like you, you're not going to win.
No.
Even if you're the incumbent.
So I guess the new question is where the coalition goes, but they'd all have to go.
Well, they have a choice. It's Johnson or Vallis.
Yeah, they would all have to go to Johnson to make up the gap. Although I guess
not
the
all.
other 6%.
Vallis gets 33.8, Johnson gets 20, Lightfoot gets 17.
Yeah, so most
14
of the
Johnson
17.
and Lightfoot together. Beat Vallis here.
It can happen, and that's, I guess,
Garcia gets 13.7. Willie Wilson, black businessman, got 9.5. There's enough votes out there to beat Vallis, but I don't know if they can put them together and all vote for the same person.
Well,
Brandon Johnson, which is who's going to be running. So
that would be
see.
the point of the upcoming general election, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the point of coalition building. So we'll see how they do.
All right, here's some hammer, nails, glue. Get to building that coalition.
Right. And whereas crime and caravans are overdone by the Republican Party, there are certain places where it resonates. And this is one of them. Since a lot of people get shot in Chicago, everybody knows that.
Well, sure. I don't know. We have heard that. And Thanks, Gary, Indiana.
Yeah. So there's that. There's other stuff that's happening, too. I don't know if you know this. Israel's falling apart, but at the same time, the UK is trying to get it together. Rishi Sunak went to announce that there's a deal on Brexit with, somehow covering Northern Ireland.
Oh.
Which isn't a done deal by any means. But here's a really interesting Guardian article about this from Raphael Baer, writing in the opinion section. Brexit will endure after Rishi Sunak's deal, but Brexitism is dying.
Yes, all right.
And Johnsonism may already be dead.
That's fine.
That would be fine. The agreement, because Johnson was going to try to stop this. Boris Johnson was going to come back and talk to people and try to stop Rishi Sunak from doing this. And Sunak did it anyway.
All right. I think I better check back in on what it is he was doing. I'll open up and listen. Okay.
The agreement was important for reasons beyond the protocol. Better relations could lead to a reset, and talks about a raft of key issues. And he makes some key points here. Brexit is a process. So it's never finished. It's like governing.
All right.
I was elected and I passed some stuff. Now I'm done governing. You're never done. There's always more stuff to do.
Yeah.
So Brexit is in effect a big umbrella for managing relations with Europe. And if you think about that in that way, Brexit's never done. The question is, how do you do it? So Brexitism, which was the motivating factor of trying to separate the UK from Europe, that's the part that's dead.
All right. So you could be, all right, well, we're outside of the European Union having Brexit, Ted, but we can either have close relations that abut rejoining, or we can...
it could be Brexit adjacent or, EU adjacent. And so this is what Rishi Sunak is trying to balance.
I see.
And here's what's weird about it, and this is why this column is so good. So he writes, Brexit's done, but it's never done. Rishi Sunak's deal to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol ends a process that's only beginning. And if that sounds paradoxical, it's because British politics uses the B word, Brexit, to describe many things and confuses different things by pretending they're all one thing.
Like CRT.
Brexit itself was an insurrection against the status quo and a promise to upend the established ways of Westminster government, but it's also a technical project and diplomatic minefield that can't be navigated without the old skills of establishment statecraft. Like Rishi Sunak, who voted to leave in 2016 and now is describing a glowing future for Britain when bridges to Europe are burning. He was a Eurosceptic who's now trying to bring, England back to Europe. So selling his deal yesterday, Sunak even boasted that Northern Ireland enjoyed, quote, a very special position in the EU single market, and that this privilege made it a magnet for investment. By celebrating the residual benefit of membership for one nation, which is, Northern Ireland, of the United Kingdom, he concedes the cost incurred by exclusion of the other three. So basically what he's saying is, I've come up with something that's really wonderful. It's a return to status quo for Northern Ireland, but the rest of us don't get to go there.
Yeah, that is interesting. So they get to stay in EU. They didn't Brexit.
They're in EU purgatory, while Northern Ireland gets to go back to the way they were, in effect.
All right. I mean,
this is the bitter contradiction and the absurdity that's defined British politics since the referendum. The only way to handle Brexit without economic arson and diplomatic isolation is to think like a Remainer. And that was a point made unsubtly by Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, when she attributed the breakthrough in talks to honesty and goodwill. In other words, this isn't Boris Johnson here, and the bluster and the yelling and the lying are gone. We're really happy about it. And so we'll make some concessions just for the pleasure of not having to deal with Boris Johnson.
Yeah, well, we went through that too. Everyone was super thrilled with having Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump.
That's exactly right. So that attitude of...
they're in the same party.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Von Leiden's praise for Dear Rishi...
Yes. Oh, that's nice, calling him dear.
...would once have been poison in conservative ears.
Okay.
Proof that the Prime Minister had been captured. But Brexit, in its most ideological conception, is a zero-sum game in which the European Commission is only happy if Britain's been diddled out of sovereignty. That's why we have to get away from those people.
Yes, sure. Okay.
Right? And that competes, of course, with fatigue and an instinct for electoral self-preservation. There's no appetite among voters for the reenactment of the Brexit wars, especially when the terrain of battle is so small, a scrap of European court jurisdiction over Northern Ireland. So some Tories have committed themselves so completely to the sovereignty crusade, they find it hard to imagine life without this struggle, like, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, a name you might remember, because, he's sort of the butt of most Monty Python, sketches.
Rees-Mogg.
And even the fundamentalists have been disoriented by the quality of concession that Sunak won for his Windsor framework. It allows for a unilateral UK halt to the application of European regulation in Northern Ireland. In other words, there's a trigger that the UK could pull to stop the deal if they're unhappy with it, even though the price of pulling the trigger would be so great that nobody really would ever want to do that. So that's the diplomatic fig leaf that allows Sunak to say we got concessions. In making the case for engagement and compromise, Sunak finds himself in closer alignment with Keir Starmer, who's his opponent, than with his two Tory predecessors. Both leaders have an interest in Brexit drifting to the margins of political debate as a matter of boring consensus. So it's Keir Starmer's position here seems to be that I'm not going to make Remain my major position because Leave won, and I'm afraid that I'm not in the majority position, so I'm going to try to dance around it as much as possible. And it's in Rishi Sunak's interest to go along with that, because inflaming the debate will only hurt the Conservatives. And Starmer says, no, it'll hurt us too. How about we both agree not to talk about it and pretend it's like done? And so that's the approach you're taking. And for people from over here who see Brexit as such a key, integral part of who Britain is and who they're going to be, and how you push it to the side like that, scratching our heads and saying, what do you mean? What are you talking about? It was a terrible deal. It ruined your country, but you're afraid to say that. And they're going, yeah, we are afraid to say that because, we got a lot of the equivalent of MAGA people here, and we don't want to piss them off.
I guess. But, yeah, they might want to take a little census on that and find out. Well, I mean, they must have, I assume they have their finger on the pulse there at some level, right? I certainly don't, so.
Right. So this is a victory for Rishi Sunak, but not bad for Starmer either, if it helps to establish the superiority of managerial pragmatism over pyrotechnic charisma. This is something else the Labour leader and his Tory counterpart have in common. They're both planning election pitches that dial down ideology and sideline the cranks. And that's easier for Starmer because he's like winning by double digits.
Okay.
So for the Tories, the weaker the party's prospects, the less inclined it feels to put in the hard yards of actual grown-up government, which is its only chance of rehab. Right?
Yeah.
Of all the conceivable treatments, Rishi Sunak putting in negotiations and working with Brussels is the bitterest pill for Conservatives to swallow. If trust and diplomacy are the ingredients of a good deal, if the national economic interest is served by closer relations with Europe, the road to getting Brexit done starts to look more like the process of undoing Brexit. So that's where the UK stands. I thought it was a pretty good explainer about what the heck's going on over there.
Yeah, I think, it's very complex, but that would be the point, that we should get that sort of level of nuance, the stuff that we were missing and we were talking about yesterday, that often people mistake about what's happening in the United States, seeing things always in black and white. It doesn't always give you the clearest picture of what's going on. Interesting. Right. So, yeah, you would think that maybe like as an analogy here in the United States situation, like the idea that the Labor Party
crime
would...
is the analogy.
Oh.
Right? People...
Yeah. It is the better analogy, I guess,
for Democrats, don't want to say, well, it's nothing.
Right.
Because if you do that, you're going to lose an election.
Yeah.
So you have to say, well, it's something, but our approach to it is better than yours. Yours is just yelling at people and, making, but Democrats haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. It's the same problem Keir Starmer has.
Well,
he knows he's in the correct position.
I think that's...
But it's much easier to run on, well, we just have to be tough on crime, and that's the answer. It's a very simple bumper sticker.
I think that's the right answer, I guess, the crime thing. And whereas I was saying, well, like, for instance, you might be inclined to say, well, what if the, Why isn't the analog the abortion issue, like where Democrats could have retreated for years, but then said, no, actually, we can beat the other party over the head with this. Couldn't you? Why aren't you beating the Conservative Party over the head with the mistake of Brexit?
Because
well, it's
Brexit
not that
is
kind
still
of issue.
fairly popular there.
Yeah,
the difference is that abortion,
it's just the wrong analogy.
Like 70% of the country thinks the Supreme Court did the wrong thing.
Yeah,
that's not the case with Brexit yet. When it becomes that then mistake. That's when you'll see it, but not now.
Or that would have been my mistake in saying, well, okay, but why isn't it treated that way? Well, it's not like that.
It's not like that. I mean, it's 51-49 over there still.
Okay. Well, that helps make some sense of it. It's not the same thing as you might think it is over.
It's not the same country. It's not the same thing. But other than that, they're pretty much similar.
Yeah, right. Same language, sort of, kind of, extra U's and everything.
But I think crime fits better because, in your heart of hearts, you know that it's being demagogued, but that alone isn't enough to beat it. You have to come up with some better strategy.
All right. I think that adds some clarity to it, too. Good. Thank you.
So speaking of adding clarity, here's a lovely piece from, and this is the title of the Substack, Your Local Epidemiologist, Caitlin Gentilina, who's very good, talking about the COVID-19 origin debate. As you know, there's the new Wall Street Journal article, and then there's the FBI saying, yeah, we tend to agree with the Department of Energy.
Something. Oh, they do? Okay.
She says, I've been asked by many to comment on the SARS-CoV-2 origin debate and new Wall Street Journal article, and honestly, I don't want to touch this topic with a 10-foot pole. That's what attracted me to this article. I read that and said,
well, that's good, too. And by the way, I wouldn't want to touch it at all, but 10 feet? Is that maybe that should be the new standards?
But I will leave you with a few
6-foot pole. Yes, all right.
1, the origin of COVID-19 is an ongoing scientific debate. Scientific consensus is not settled. We can all agree the Wuhan market was an amplification event. I don't think we'll ever know how it got there because that window of opportunity is gone, and also, by the way, China isn't totally clear on this. I added that. Disproving the lab leak, she writes, will be close to impossible. It's a tragedy, but I look forward to seeing the ongoing science. Number 2, transparency is key, and I don't like how things have to be leaked to be known. So if you have to leak that the Department of Energy says this, what does that say?
Okay, right.
The debate is another example of false dichotomies. In reality, opinions range on a scale from natural spillover to lab leak. Perspectives fall somewhere within the spectrum of probabilities. I lean more toward natural, but I'm certainly not 100%, about maybe 70% given the evidence. I think everybody should recognize where they land on the spectrum and why, and recognize that there are conflicts of interest all over the place. So many initially dismissed the lab spillover because the original messenger, Trump, and because it was wrapped up in other conspiracy theories, like being a Chinese bioweapon. That is totally false. Clearly debunked. Science has proven that's not the case. Nothing about it was deliberate.
Well, that's another one of the costs of dealing with a politician like Trump is now, even if the truth presents itself, you'll have difficulty getting people to believe it because a dummy handled the situation.
Right. You could say the same thing about the East Palestine train derailment. The deregulation happened under Trump, but how much of it was actually responsible for the accident? Well, everybody knows it was Trump. Well, let's actually take a look at it and see what's going on here.
Okay. Hey, that sounds almost fair.
Underlying all of this is that there's the possibility of a lab leak and a possibility of a natural spillover and a possibility of intentional lab leaks. And we need to address all of these to ensure a safer future. And I'm afraid we're losing sight of all of this.
Okay.
So there's another piece in a different blog called Force of Infection.
Wow.
By Caitlin Rivers, who's another epidemiologist and friend of your neighborhood epidemiologist.
No, well, sure, they're all pals.
Beyond the pandemic origins debate, we don't need an answer before acting. I'm not going to weigh in on the debate of the origins of COVID.
Not me.
I think it's unlikely we'll ever know. The spillover event, in whatever form, is a spark that ignited the pandemic more than 3 years ago. It takes around 5 days for an infection progress to symptoms. So even the first victim may not have known when and where they became infected. And investigating the pandemic's origins is worth undertaking, but we shouldn't wait for it to yield a definitive answer. And frankly, the origins discussion is too toxic like many of my public health colleagues, I received a steady stream of threatening mail over the course of the pandemic. It's had the effect that the senders likely intended, which is to discourage experts from participating in public conversation. It's a shame, and I wish things were different, but the personal costs of engaging are too heavy. I do have one suggestion for a path out of the quicksand, though. What if we accepted the plausibility of a lab leak, and that's enough to act? It's not a trial requiring a verdict. We don't need to confirm the virus origin beyond all doubt before implementing preventative measures. So in other words, okay, if you accept that it might have been a lab leak, improve our labs.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. What else did they want out of it? I mean,
they want to, that there weren't
some Republicans did. Yeah, I like, for instance, I don't get what else do Democratic-leaning opinion columnists who say, see, for the third time, you should be investigating a lab leak. Well, where do we go? What's the idea here? What are you trying to prove?
Let's look at our own labs and let's look at the chance of something leaking. And if we see that there are potential breaches, let's fix them before it happens.
And let's roll it back in the next Republican administration and then have an accident in the following Democratic administration.
That's for another day. But since you asked about what to do about it, that's what you do.
I was wondering because I would like to know what's the end game here for people who are like, I'm just asking questions. Right. But why? My question, I'm just asking, what are we going to do with the answers?
I'm asking, why are you asking questions since you're not a lab person or an epidemiologist, and you happen to have a TV show on Fox News at night, so what the hell is it to you?
Yeah, or a column in the New York Times, for that matter. I'd just like to know what we're supposed to be doing. Like you say, aha, I was right. Okay, and to what end? What are we doing?
I should add one thing.
It's fine. It's a good answer. Yeah.
There is no consensus about what to do about defining how the pandemic started.
Okay.
But there is consensus that Bret Stephens is an idiot.
Oh, well, all right. At least we have that going for us.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think I see the second one here. I have the logo.
No, it's linked in the first one.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll find it and I'll provide it to all of you. Or you can find it when you read the COVID-19 origin debate in your local epidemiologist. Okay. Thank you. That clears things up, I think. Plus, it's only Wednesday, which means if it's not clear, you can come back tomorrow and clear it up.
Okay. Well,
all right.
I think I'll just send you that second piece just so you have it.
All right.
Easier for Scott Anderson to put together the summary there.
Do you hear that, Scott? Okay. Thank you, Greg. Okay, I appreciate that. That'll save me a click. You saved me a click.
I'll save you 8 seconds.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got to figure out what's something really great to do with it. Probably undo Brexit for, I don't know, Cornwall. Maybe something like that. A small portion of Britain itself. All right. Well, thanks for all the explaining, and let's do some more tomorrow. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's all vomit on Ron DeSantis. Why don't we? Okay, well, that was an exciting beginning to the first hour of the show. Now time to move on, and let's see. I'm trying to decide whether or not we have parsed through the Trump or the Fox News thing, and I think we have. I think we've covered all the angles. I had put away another... I guess Philip Bump's piece in the Washington Post on the subject, but I think we've kind of covered the topic here. But let me just read a little bit of it, and I'll make you aware of the fact that the article was published. This was yesterday's publication. The other way Rupert Murdoch tried to tip the scales for Trump, but I'm just checking to make sure we haven't missed yet another fourth, fifth, sixth way in our discussions, or whether we have actually already covered it. He begins by saying Donald Trump couldn't have asked for much more from Fox News over the course of the 2020 presidential election, or really over the course of his presidency, or even before. From start to finish, Fox News viewing Republicans were more enthusiastic about Trump than than about other Republicans, and certainly than Americans overall, thanks in part to the network's incessant efforts to bash the left and its efforts to mostly ignore stories that would hurt him. As the 2020 campaign progressed, the network ran interference in myriad ways. It quickly elevated Trump's insistences that the country should move on from the coronavirus, so Trump hoped the economy would rebound before the election. It aired incessant footage of violence that followed Black Lives Matter protests that summer, often recycling footage for weeks on end. Earlier in his administration, Trump had simply rolled Fox News coverage into his campaign rallies. Host Sean Hannity explicitly endorsed him in 2016. On Monday, though, all of this was known, that's true. On Monday, we got a new look at how Fox boosted Trump quietly, behind the scenes, and in the person of Fox Corporation Chairman Rupert Murdoch, which is why I think it may be that the first consequence of all of this is to try, Fox may try to save itself by purging the Murdochs, or at least one of the Murdochs, and say, see, we're done here. The poison is gone. Even though, the poison is the product, so it's not gone. The revelation comes from, of course, the court filing submitted by Dominion Voting Systems as part of its big-ass defamation lawsuit. You know the figure already. Dominion, you know the story. They make voting machines. They were accused of fraud and tampering, etc., etc. In a filing release earlier this month, Dominion revealed internal messages between Fox News hosts showing that they didn't believe the claims, for which they were nonetheless providing airtime. The filing released Monday focuses more on Murdoch as head of the Fox empire, and it includes the comment offered almost as an aside. Then, the thing that was troubling me so much. During Trump's campaign, Rupert provided Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner with Fox confidential information about Biden's ads, along with debate strategy, the filing reads. And I still have not seen what is the evidence for and the description of debate strategy in any of these articles, but I don't know. I guess maybe I have to read the deposition myself in order to see if it's there. In a parenthetical, it explains some or all of that confidential information as providing Kushner a preview of Biden's ads before they were public. This is a remarkable claim. To best understand why requires an understanding of how political campaigns work. Does it really? It's not obvious. Well, let's see. There are two groups of voters that a campaign tries to contact: core supporters, whom the campaign tries to ensure cast a vote, and persuadable voters, people who would back the candidate if approached with the right message. To determine that message, campaigns conduct polls. Commonly, they are constructed like this. They ask who a respondent supports. They offer arguments against the candidates and measure support again. They offer rebuttals to those arguments and measure support for a third time. The idea is to assess what issues or rhetoric will move persuadable voters or tamp down turnout among their opponents' core support. In a well-funded campaign, attack ads are not random. They are leveraging issues that polling shows will achieve one of those outcomes. I think this is pretty basic, but I don't know. No one has said it explicitly in the column yet. So let's go through with it. Campaigns do opposition research on their own candidates to get a sense of what attacks are coming and how to prepare for them. Now, imagine if they knew with certainty what attacks were coming because the friendly chairman of a right-wing media organization was tipping you off. I thought that was, understood in just revealing the news, that he was giving them a sneak preview of Biden's ads before they aired. But in case you didn't understand, I guess this is the Axios Why It Matters section of the story. So anyway, Bump goes on to say, my first response when reading the allegation included in the Dominion filing was to wonder what ads Murdoch had access to. Was there some repository of ads that media outlets shared? There is not, a person familiar with the industry confirmed. Did he have access to ads that run on Fox affiliates in local markets? My assumption was that the Biden campaign wasn't spending a lot of money on Fox News spots, given the audience's or the network's audience, but they were. Remember, one intended outcome of campaign spending can be to dampen support among your opponent's base. During the Republican National Convention in August, for example, Biden's campaign ran this embedded here 2-minute spot on Fox News. We're not going to play it because it's 2 minutes. The campaign also made national buys, often during sporting events like the World Series. That would be on the regular Fox network, not the news channel. But from April to June of 2020, 1/5 of the Biden campaign's cable TV advertising was on Fox News. The campaign ran more than 100 spots on Fox and Friends alone, even as the show was amplifying pro-Trump, anti-Biden messaging. I can't, actually knowledgeably comment on the wisdom of doing that. I don't know what the content of the spots were, but it seems weird. Anyway, it's not clear how often Murdoch might have given Kushner a preview of Biden's spots or what came of it. The Trump campaign was not a traditional campaign, of course, rebutting attacks on the incumbent president's policy positions and so on. Like, that might not have been of much interest to them. But it seems more likely that the fingerprints of Trump's team seeing Biden's spots, would appear in the president's Twitter feed. I see. The campaign's most closely watched rapid response outlet. The ad above, leading with Trump's slow descent down a ramp at West Point, does not seem to have inspired any response, much less a pre-buttal. And that this 2-minute spot, I guess, is probably about trying to make a point about the energy level, rather, or, that Biden is, though older, young and full of vim and vigor, whereas Trump is a doddering old fool, maybe, I guess, was supposed to be the message of that. And, that's an interesting point. He may have shared that with them, with Kushner, and Kushner may or may not have told Trump about it, or Trump may have opted not to react, but I find it hard to believe that he didn't. Anyway, or that he wouldn't have if he had been informed. And it's important to note that sharing ads with a rival candidate is not common. There have been instances when a low staffer in a local TV station has done this, veteran Democratic consultant Joe Trippi told the Post. But for an owner or head of network, I've never heard of something like this. That Murdoch facilitated such an arrangement isn't a surprise, nor is it a surprise he offered Trump debate advice. So it wasn't that it made it sound like he had somehow gotten a hold of Biden's campaign or debate strategy and decided to share that with Trump. But I don't see how that could have happened. But I guess this is more likely it's just, I have a strategy that I think you should use in the debate, and I'm going to tell you what it is. Well, people do that all the time, and it's probably useless. I don't know. Maybe it was great advice. But yeah, he shouldn't have been offering it as the head of the fair and balanced Fox News channel. That's certainly true. In both the most recent and earlier filings from Dominion, Murdoch is quoted as advocating explicitly for his charges to help boost Republicans. We should concentrate on Georgia, helping any way we can, Murdoch wrote to his team in the days before the runoff Senate races in that state, meaning, obviously, that they should help the Republicans win. In the new filing, he's quoted as writing to the head of Fox News that, quote, we must tell our viewers again and again what they will get with tax legislation proposed by Trump. He was advocating for acting in service to Trump and Trump's politics. Contrast this with the other cable news channels. In 2010, MSNBC suspended host Joe Scarborough for having made small political contributions several years prior. It is critical that we enforce our standards and policies, the network's then president, Phil Griffin, said in a statement. Fox News hosts, on the other hand, host Republican fundraising dinners and speak at political rallies. The difference is stark. It is, and should be highlighted. He's right. A decade ago, Murdoch was mired in a different scandal. British publications that he owned were caught illegally accessing voicemails of various public figures. Yeah, remember this? An extensive investigation led to arrests and resignations, the closure of one of Murdoch's papers, and the end of a takeover bid News Corporation was planning. Murdoch himself was able to maintain or remain at a distance from the scandal, but admitted that he bore responsibility for what had occurred. A parliamentary report was harshly critical of Murdoch, stating that he exhibited willful blindness to what was going on in his companies and publications. Because this culture of illegal behavior was allowed to spread, the report concluded, Rupert Murdoch is not a fit person to exercise the stewardship of a major international company. He remained the primary steward of Fox, luckily for Trump. And that is actually the end of Bump's article, and very true, a good reminder. We were shown very clearly who Rupert Murdoch was, and we chose to say, but that's in Great Britain. We don't have to worry about that here. It's all taken care of. Or we're totally different. Or I don't know what. We fought a revolution in order to be able to befoul our own democracy by not taking a clear cue from the investigations of a fellow English-speaking democracy. Anyway, too bad for all of that. So, wow. Anyway, I thought that was of some interest and did add a little bit to what we were discussing. I do feel like I wanted to give some time over to what I know this is kind of a jump and a distraction, but I wanted to add a little bit more from yesterday's reading of Evan Koren's article, or our reading of Evan Koren's article on Ukraine-Polish-American relations and the historic context, because we were just kind of getting to the historic context when we had the very pleasant diversion and opportunity to talk with Joan McCarter about what was going on in this country. And you probably by that point were wondering, well, what the hell are we spending all this time on Polish-Lithuanian history for? And the answer, I think, was just about to come up when we had to switch topics. So maybe if we can jump back into the second half of this article, we had learned that the partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the 1760s and 70s, was very much on the mind of the founders, and they were, for instance, very intent on not repeating some of the procedural and organizational mistakes made by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in writing the rules for its parliament. And let's see, we had mentioned, and I got taken to task about that whole piece for not concentrating more on Casimir Pulaski, who only got the passing mention as being the father of the American cavalry, but it's not my fault. Talk to Evan Koren about that. But anyway, Casimir Pulaski, that guy's a jerk. I don't know. Maybe someone wants to, and if you want to write a piece about that, by all means, send it along. We love historical context. Let's see. We had mentioned also, we were focusing instead on Kosciuszko. And, somebody sent me a pronunciation guide, but I haven't had a chance to listen to it. But Kosciuszko, I think that's right. Isn't there? And he has a bridge, doesn't he? And I think that's how I learned how to pronounce the name. And maybe I've got it all wrong, but that might be the East Coast bastardization of the last name. But it was Kosciuszko who got the most mention here, and there was the largest recitation of his American Revolutionary War doings in this piece. And we got down to, let's see, he had been a hero of the American Revolution, returned with Chaim Solomon to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1784, where they tried to reform things and fix things up and bolster the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth based on their experience with the American Revolution, and especially for Kosciuszko, the military there. And then they unfortunately did not succeed, and they were in fact imprisoned by the Russians, right? Let's see, we got through all of that, and then we probably, we got to the point where Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine each reemerge as their own independent countries in 1917 through 1919 in the aftermath of World War I. Yes, okay, here we are. Tragically, they fought each other, right, as much as they worried about the successors to the partitioning powers, the new USSR and unified Germany. And then it got really interesting. Many Ukrainians saw the Poles as former occupiers. Poland had a very expansive notion of what the boundaries of a reborn Poland should be, with claims that overlapped the claims of their neighbors. And then we learned about the Woodrow Wilson issue. It was a case study of how Woodrow Wilson's notion of organizing international boundaries based on nation states didn't align with the facts on the ground of who lived there. Explaining, of course, that a nation state, as we refer to it, is when the boundaries of a country align with the boundaries of an ethnicity. Throughout the world, populations of different ethnicities have always lived intermixed. It is the most common state in world history, and one that a post-Wilson worldview has a hard time contemplating. And then this interesting tidbit, Wilson, being a product of the U.S. South, was ignoring the facts that had surrounded him his whole life and imposing as the defining organizational notion of international boundaries of a Southern idealized notion of ethnic segregation. This while at the same time ignoring that the segregated society he idealized would not function or exist without African Americans doing most of the work and existing within the South. This Wilsonian notion would help spur on a century of ethnic cleansing as those who sought power would try to create ethnically homogeneous areas where none had ever existed, because legitimacy in Wilson's nation-state international order was based on the boundaries of countries and ethnicities aligning. The 13th of Wilson's 14 points, of course, being that one about the independent Polish state should be created, which should include territories inhabited by indisputably Polish populations, which should get assured a free and secure access to the sea, etc., etc. And then, of course, this spurred great hopes by the Poles that they could create an independent Poland, and helped spur much of the Wilsonian problems created in Poland's neighborhood as boundary arguments erupted over what was indisputably Polish populations, or what were they anyway. As Poles, Ukrainians, and Lithuanians fought each other over boundaries, Russia's new communist rulers tried to expand west. Ukraine took the worst of this, ultimately being consumed in the new USSR. Briefly, in this process, Poland stopped its fighting with its neighbors long enough to come to Ukraine's help against the communists, but it was too late, and Poland itself barely beat back the advancing Red Army at the gates of Warsaw. After independent Ukraine was destroyed by the Soviets, some Ukrainians would fight on for independence for decades. Some of these fighters would use Polish territory as a refuge and home base from which to keep fighting for an independent Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Polish government, between World War I and II, World Wars I and II, developed a record of treating the Ukrainians who lived within its borders badly. Only too late, once Poland itself was partitioned yet again out of existence by the Nazis and Soviets in 1939, did many Poles and others in East Central Europe realize that they had sown the seeds of their own destruction by not standing together against the partitioning powers. Even though they rearranged themselves, these partitioning powers, they're interested in partitioning you. They may be back. Look out. This is one of the dominant lessons driving Polish, Baltic, and East Central European unity to support Ukraine today. The countries that have experienced Russian and German occupation know that if they do not stand together, their turn to be attacked will come soon. Poland has made itself into a strong, determined partner of Ukraine as Ukraine fights to preserve its independence from Russian aggression. The lessons of history have shown Russia first tries to destroy an independent Ukraine before trying to destroy an independent Poland. For Poles and Ukrainians, the American revolutionary cause spoke to their values in a way they were willing to cross the Atlantic to fight for. America might not have won the American Revolution without the help of these Poles and Ukrainians, and America would ultimately help Poland's rebirth, being the first country to recognize the Poland that emerged from the ashes of World War I. Ukraine's struggle to preserve its independence from Russia's attack and Poland's resolve to help Ukraine is a result of their joint history, a history that has been deeply intertwined with American history since America's founding. So a very stirring and, I guess, patriotic-leaning call for support for Ukraine as a sensible American historical position, and informed by the results of ignoring the history of Russian and German aggression in Central Europe. So, okay, we got to the end of that one. I just thought I wanted to throw that in there and make sure that you got the benefit of having sat through the first half by hearing about what happened in the second half of the article. So, now back to domestic politics, and there's plenty of it for us to enjoy. And let's see if we can keep, we got a couple of quick hits we could probably deliver to you. Thanks to, let's see, the front page of Daily Kos, for instance, and I might share some other info. Let's see, I don't know. We'll see what we can fit in prior to the break. Let me start because it's first in pocket, which means it was the last one in pocket. Last in, first out. Marjorie Taylor Greene, murdery traitor that she is, claims that she was attacked at a restaurant. How do you like that? There are skeptics, of course, and I think they include the bulk of American citizenry, probably. But skeptics respond. This is all part of the title of the piece posted by Walter Einenkel at Daily Kos yesterday. And golly gee whiz, basically the upshot of this is she's upset that she was supposedly attacked, I guess verbally, at a restaurant, which is a favorite claim for whatever reason of Republicans. They think this really is going to work terrifically for them. And I guess there's no video evidence of it, which is unusual given how much video evidence of how much of murdery traitor Greene's life there is. She, of course, came to Congress as a, video blogger and YouTuber from the crazy QAnon right wing, and she delighted in videotaping her antics, but she didn't videotape this one. And of course, the ridiculousness of it all is she's now calling for civility, you see. You shouldn't be attacking me in restaurants. Can't we all be civil? From probably the least civil member of Congress, the person who has done the worst job at adjusting to what's supposed to be the dignity of the office. Walter puts it this way: Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, fresh off her screaming during the State of the Union, again, proposing a dissolution of the United States and attacking Joe Biden for supporting Ukraine, seems to have no plans to stop sticking her foot into her mouth. Representative Greene went to her unsuspended Twitter account on February 27th to allege the following: I was attacked in a restaurant. She has a weird way of saying things. I was attacked in a restaurant by an insane woman, oh no, and screamed at by her adult son. They had no respect for the restaurant. It was probably Zaxby's Chicken or something. I don't know what it was. Or the staff, or the other people dining, or people like me who simply have different political views. Oh. They are self-righteous, insane, and completely out of control. I was sitting at my table working with my staff and never even noticed these people until they turned into demons. Ah, demons. That probably requires horror or dramatic. People used to respect others, even if they had different views, but not anymore. Our country is gone. Boo-hoo. Well, obviously, Walter knows all the story about this. Yeah, you read that right. As most people have remarked, Ms. Greene isn't the most reliable narrator of any event, for one thing, because she is a liar who works for liars who make money and consolidate power by lying. NBC News tried to get some attestation of these events and received a statement from Greene's deputy chief, of staff, Nick Dyer, who claims a woman began berating the representative at a restaurant, and then her adult son began, quote, screaming expletives at the top of his lungs. Well, if one person on her staff says something maybe happened, that's something. The rest of the known universe, having been subject to Ms. Greene's, quote, respect and public displays of, quote, control over the last 6 years, responded with a resounding, ha! And, of course, the responses were pretty much what you would expect on Twitter world. A lot of people pointed out that while Ms. Greene was unable to provide any evidence of being harassed, there is a video of her, before she carpetbagged her way into Congress, harassing a teenage David Hogue on the streets of Washington, D.C. I've sent that around many times. Mr. Hogue, of course, a survivor of the mass shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, was in D.C. at the time to speak to representatives about gun safety legislation. In fact, David Hogue himself shared his experience with Ms. Greene, tweeting, "Man, that sucks. I was attacked and screamed at in 2018 by an insane woman." named Marjorie Taylor Greene. She had no respect for the privacy of me as an 18-year-old school shooting survivor or my staff. She was self-righteous, insane, and completely out of control, which is exactly, of course, what she complains of happening to her. Now, let's see Marjorie in her natural rich kid cosplaying woman of the white people shtick. Here, an embedded video, circulated by Brian Taylor Cohen, but another of her complaint videos. There's more, of course, and the record is replete with videotaped instances of Marjorie Taylor Greene doing, of course, everything that she accuses everybody else of doing, because, of course, every Republican accusation is a confession. You can't change my mind. There's no point in even trying. As I said, there's like 6 embedded videos of her screaming at the State of the Union addresses, of her pounding on the locked door of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's congressional office and screaming at the staff through the mail slot before she was a member of Congress. She is totally insane, of course, and couldn't have happened to a worse person, because there aren't any.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I almost forgot. We have another half hour to do on the show. I was, drifting off, reading my messages, thinking about taking a nap, what have you, maybe a cup of coffee. Right, so there's more things that I had grabbed from yesterday's visit to Daily Kos, my daily roundup of what's happening there. A couple other things. I wanted to spend some time on this one because Joan was here yesterday, and she had just written this piece, I think. It was from yesterday. At any rate, I think she had just finished it, or maybe was just finishing it up. And she mentioned to me, while we were still in break, and she had just called that she was working on this. And then we never got back around to it. And it was a good subject. And I thought, I don't know. I thought we were going to get back around to it, and then I forgot. We got sidetracked. You know how it is. You're just visiting with an old friend, and golly gee whiz, time gets away from you. So I thought I'd bring it up. And it was this one. It is entitled, Multimillionaire with Cushy Desk Job Wants You to Work Until You're 70. What are we talking about? Of course, with Social Security back on the chopping block / negotiating table, you should be aware that people who are very frequently friendly to your cause and are generally thought of as, though registered independents, thought of as Democrats, sometimes have some spotty records, and, you should jerk the reins every once in a while and try and bring them back under control before things get out of hand. Joan is writing here about Maine's independent Senator Angus King, and his ideas about making up, once again, approaching some sort of grand bargain again on Social Security, when really, guys, this should already be behind us forever. But, there are people who return to those glory days every once in a while. Well, she begins writing it this way. Come on, Senator Angus King, read the damn room. I mean, that's really the summation of all the feelings we should all be having about this. I'm going to tell you what your feelings should be. But she's right about this. Read the room. The independent senator from Maine, the state with the oldest population in the country. Don't forget about that. It's the opposite of, you thought it was Florida because that's where all the people were retiring to. But as it turns out, no, it's not the case. And of course, a whole bunch of other people went there and did a whole bunch of other things. And now it's not the oldest population. I don't know if it ever was. Maine has the oldest population in the country. Therefore, you would think an intense interest in maintaining every possible Social Security benefit there could possibly be. But Maine, which has the oldest population in the country, and its senator has decided that his 2024 reelect requires that he talk with Republicans about tinkering with Social Security. No, don't. And if it's Republicans talking about it, well, it's nothing good for the program or for the people counting on it. King, who caucuses with the Democrats, is leading the group along with Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana. One option they are talking about, gradually increasing the retirement age to 70. Yes, 70. Now, that's a fine thing for 79-year-old King and 65-year-old Cassidy to decide. Of course, they'll have no problem doing their jobs in their 8th decades and 9th decades if they stick around. They're senators. It's nice work if you can get it being a senator. You can do it until you croak, provided the people keep electing you. You only have to show up on the job in Washington, D.C. for 8, maybe 9 months out of the year because of all the time you get for various holidays and, of course, most of August. You have people to figure out your travel. You have people to write your speeches. You have people to write your bills, if that's something you feel like doing for your job at all. You have people to drive you around, and you have a person who manages all of those people. King also has no financial worries, as it turns out. In 2018, the last year for which statistics are readily available, he was himself a multimillionaire with a net worth of nearly $9.5 million. He was the 16th richest senator. Senators are an extraordinarily rich bunch, that should be said. Cassidy is practically impoverished in comparison with just $1.1 million. The other bright ideas these guys are kicking around are some sort of privatization scheme. This is a weird one. I just heard about this yesterday, too. A sovereign wealth fund for the United States. Yeah. We usually, when we're talking about sovereign wealth funds, it's usually we're talking about the Saudish Arabian sovereign wealth fund, or Qatari sovereign wealth fund. We're talking about the Gulf oil states and their sovereign wealth fund. Well, we're going to have one now that would be started with $1.5 trillion in borrowed funds. There would be a trigger in it so that if it failed to yield an 8% return, then both the income cap and the payroll tax would be increased at a rate to keep the program solvent for 75 years. I don't know. What do you think about that? Well, you could really take a fund and with certain assumptions, take all your revenue from there, Cassidy told Semaphore in an interview. Certain assumptions, that phrase, is doing a lot of work there. Also note that this comes with a tax increase if it doesn't work in what would likely be an economic downturn. That is most likely the reason the fund wasn't making expected returns. So that would be an interesting response, especially if it were automatic. But for Republicans to try and design a tax increase during an economic downturn, that seems unlikely to gain a tremendous amount of support, maybe. Also, horribly regressive, with the lowest earners, of course, being hit much harder than the wealthy. Besides making us work until we're 70, their other brilliant idea is easily just as bad and regressive. It would completely upend the existing benefit formula used to determine monthly payments to be based on years worked instead of the current formula that uses the average earnings over 35 years worked. The existing formula is flexible to allow for people leaving and entering the workforce to return to school because of an illness or injury, perhaps. They might have left the workforce, or to take care of young children or sick or elderly family members, or whatever life reasons that might interrupt work. But instead, this is strictly, well, how many years did you work? So if you ever take care of someone else besides yourself by stopping your work for a year or less, any amount of time, you'll be penalized under their new formula outline. The current formula adjusts your earnings to take into account historical changes in wages, and then takes the highest earning 35 years to calculate the average indexed monthly earnings up to the maximum taxable earning cap. Wow, there's an awful lot in this, but she knows her stuff, right? Now at $160,200. The system is geared toward making sure the lowest earning workers get the maximum possible benefit. Just counting years worked rewards people with more years of work and penalizes people with fewer years of work, obviously. Kathleen Romig with the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities told Semaphore, people with uninterrupted work histories could benefit, she said, but on net, it's definitely a cut. There's a much simpler way to shore up Social Security's long-term health. Lift the earnings cap subject to payroll taxes. Even a Republican, even Joe Manchin, has said that that's an option. The problem is they want to condition doing that on a bunch of things like raising the retirement age and making other cuts. The other independent from New England has better ideas and the ear of President Biden. It's Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who met with Biden in late January to talk about his proposal to bolster Social Security's finances by making the nation's rich pay more in payroll taxes. He wants to apply the payroll tax to income over $250,000 a year, which would give the program another 75 years of solvency. He also pitched Biden on his plan to increase existing benefits for everyone on Social Security with an additional $200 a month. Sanders is arguing that the Democrats have to counter all of this BS. Oh my goodness, she uses the real word. From Republicans and King and Manchin about there's a extraneous word in here. Sanders is arguing Democrats have to counter all of this BS from Republicans and King and Manchin about needing to, probably cut, reform, something. That's the word that's missing. Social Security. It is not enough to point out the reactionary anti-worker vision of the Republican Party. We have to present a positive pro-worker alternative. And the truth is that Social Security does have a solvency problem, and we've got to address that. The most effective way to take it off the deficit peacock's chopping block is to take away the narrative that it's doomed. The most effective way to do that is to start making the wealthy pay a fair share. That's, I think, long been proposed, long been fought against, but probably time to give some consideration to that, and not necessarily to couple it with cuts to the workers, or the benefits of the workers who will actually need it along the way. Okay, so got you updated on that, and you're gonna have to keep an eye on your senator, independent Senator Angus King, and make sure he realizes what it is he's screwing around with, and that it's not particularly helpful to give in to the Republican narrative on Social Security. All right, let's see. Another sort of random tidbit that I picked up on from Daily Kos front page reporting the other day that you might be interested in. I know it's silly, it's weird, but once again, and this is I don't know, somehow still endlessly fascinating to me that in the atmosphere of Republicans being stirred to unreasonable and sometimes dangerous action over the threat they perceive from drag performers, as it turns out, usually Republicans haven't given much thought to what all of this means and things that they've done in their own past and all sorts of, this is the basics of the story here. I'll give you the headline. Anti-drag Tennessee governor runs from a reporter when confronted with a photo of himself in drag. Rebecca Sager reporting this one for Daily Kos. Tennessee Republican Governor Bill Lee is at war with drag performers in his state because MAGA demands it, of course. Lee says he plans to sign a recently passed bill restricting adult cabaret performances and banning, of course, for good measure because they're so closely related, gender-affirming care for the state's minors. One has, of course, little to nothing whatsoever to do with the other, but in their minds, oh, I don't know, something, gender, and golly gee whiz, put it all in one bill, right? Adults performing at cabaret houses and gender affirming both. There's gender involved in both, and it's all of peace for this guy. But anyway, when confronted with his own past on Monday, after a 1977 photo emerged on Reddit of Bill Lee himself wearing a miniskirt cheerleader outfit, complete with a wig and a string of pearls, the governor's office claimed to the Daily Beast, that's different. And maybe in many ways, if you really want to sit and parse it, I suppose you could come up with some differences. But this is a very interesting thing that there'll be more like this. Plenty of conservative Republicans who grew up in the good old days and and yada yada, and screaming about drag performance and it changes our gender identities and yada yada. It's so dangerous. But almost all of them will have. Because I never could figure this out, even when I lived during the same era, and I never could figure out what the fascination was. And I don't really want to know. But yeah, pretty much every American high school yearbook will feature photos from the 70s and 80s and earlier and later of the, very often the big man on campus, the tough guys, the football players, whatever it is, coming to school Halloween time, when it's time to come dressed in costume, and they think it's hilarious for some reason, and it's not funny. It's just not particularly original, and it's also sort of weird. I mean, there's a million things you can dress up for as Halloween, but one of the enduring dumb jokes of America is the football players and other tough guys showing up dressed as cheerleaders for Halloween. And some of them really vamp it up. Now, I'm sure they don't consider themselves to be drag performers, but I don't know. Well, you would lose any drag competition in any of the shows, like, RuPaul's Drag Race. And they would say, you're terrible, you're lame, you're horrible at this. I don't know that it was ever their aim to compete, but I'm constantly puzzled about what the fascination is. And I mean, it's not hard to figure something out. You give it some Freudian analysis, I suppose. They would, of course, object strenuously. No, none of this has to do with my interest in exploring sexual boundaries. I'm just making a joke. It's just a thing Americans do. And, it does go back a long ways. As people have pointed out right at the beginning of this whole drag controversy, plenty of pictures, still lots of black and white snapshots from USO performances during World War II of soldiers entertaining fellow troops, dressed in the grass skirts and the coconut bras and the whole bit. It's a enduring fascination. I don't really need to get into it, but there you go. Bill Lee did the same thing. Lee was caught off guard when a Tennessee Holler reporter confronted him about the photo, asking if he remembered dressing in drag in 1977. Lee, of course, off the cuff says, that's ridiculous. Conflating something like that to sexualized entertainment in front of children, which is a very serious subject, Lee snarled before scrambling into his SUV. The governor added, I think the concern is what's right there in that building. Children that are potentially exposed to sexualized entertainment, to obscenity, and we need to make sure they're not. I think that's something that should happen in Tennessee, and it will because of this bill. And here the tweet of the Tennessee Holler showing their video of what happened there. Now to the reality of things at the moment. HB 9 does not specifically ban drag shows. It bars adult cabaret performances, whatever that might be, on public property or in a location where they could be viewed by a minor. And by the way, if it's a picture of you dressed as a cheerleader in drag at the local high school, back in your high school days, I mean, is that not exposing children to it? I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, but anyway. So HB 9 bans these adult cabaret performances. The bill cites topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers, and male or female impersonators, like Bill Lee, for instance. The bill passed in the Tennessee House 74-19 and will return to the Senate for a procedural vote and then go to Lee's desk for his signature. The Tennessee ACLU writes that the anti-transgender bills are not only in violation of the First Amendment to express oneself, but they're written so broadly and vaguely that they would allow government officials to censor performers based on their own subjective viewpoints of what they deem appropriate on any given day, and describing the bills as a malicious attempt to remove LGBTQ people from public life. These bans are being fueled by the same paranoia banning books and censoring teachers. Lee's term has been notoriously anti-LGBTQ and anti-trans, and there's some examples as to why, but once again, just a moment for the conflation of these things, right? Adults dressing in drag, not at all the same thing as transgenderism, particularly among the youth. I mean, one, they're two different age groups. Two totally different aims. And three, they just don't belong in any bill together. But, I mean, that's been the aim all along, would be to conflate the two of them so that they can make... There are some people who are weirdly angry and offended by drag performances who may not have been even aware of transgender issues, whether among youth or anyone else, for that matter. But then there were also probably people who were weirded out and offended for whatever their stupid reasons were by transgender issues who knew nothing about or cared nothing about drag issues, but easy way to put them under, all in one tent and give themselves that much more political strength to threaten both groups. I think that's weird. I think, of course, what the ACLU hints at here is the subjective nature of what the bill says it's outlawing. And I mean, that being so subjective, you'd have a hard time convincing me that there wouldn't be somebody who would say, yeah, absolutely, this would include dressing as a cheerleader on Halloween if you're not a biologically designated girl, whatever that may mean in this day and age. Why is that not included? Well, we were just kidding around. Well, drag performers would say the same. We're not women, and we're not trying to be. Many of them, have no interest in being. It's just part of the performance, part of the fun. Well, that's not fun. That ain't fun. Well, you know what? Dressing as a cheerleader ain't fun in my book, and I never said to any, not once did I ever tell anybody, I think you have a real problem. You might be demonic. You should be outlawed. It would have been ridiculous to tell people that. Anyway, as I said, more to the point, I suppose, in terms of the legislation, more recitation of Lee's anti-LGBTQ status and standing in Tennessee. In 2021, he signed another similar bill, HB 3, an anti-transgender bill banning trans girls and women in the state from playing on teams that align with their gender identity. The background of those sort of things. Lee's apparent drag photo, by the way, not his first offensive photo to become public. In 2019, NBC News reported on Lee's time at Auburn University in the Kappa Alpha fraternity, where he and other members dressed in Confederate uniforms for an Old South shindig, dressed as losers. That's interesting. Lee was seen in a 1980 yearbook photo wearing a Confederate soldier costume and is seen standing beside a woman in antebellum dress. One photo, not with Lee, is captioned, "The South shall rise again. Right, Bill? When the band plays Dixie, a tear comes to our eyes. I'd do anything, Lee, but she comes first." I don't even know what the hell that's supposed to mean. Lee was forced to apologize when the photo became public. and will likely not be forced to apologize for dressing as a cheerleader while opposing anybody else's right to do the same, essentially. I don't know. I just find that irritating and annoying. And, well, what can I tell you? Just Republican from, it's got Republicanism written all over it. All right. A few more minutes still in the program here. Let's jump back down to continuing work by News Channel 5 in Nashville, who brought us the first round of stories on Tennessee Congressman, brand new Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles and his own weird hypocrisy and fabulism, attempting maybe to compete with George Santos on that front. And there's more to report. Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right or not, and don't care that much. Hope he's gone before I find out. Didn't want you to see his college transcript! Exclamation point. We got it anyway. Well, why wouldn't he want you to see that? Because, of course, he claims to be a trained economist, and he's not, and to the extent he tried to be, he wasn't very good at it. The transcript shows self-proclaimed economist, the self-proclaimed economist, I would say, but this is in the language of headlines, took only one community college economics course, which he barely passed, and did not major in international relations as claimed. That's interesting, too, because I was wondering had he photoshopped his diploma in order to give himself a Bachelor of Sciences in international relations. But it turns out there are some accredited institutions that do award that. But what's the story? Did he Photoshop? Now the question has to be, did he Photoshop the major onto this thing? All right. What was in Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles' college transcript that he didn't want you to see? News Channel 5 investigates, now has the answer. Among the findings, the freshman Republican is a self-proclaimed economist who, it turns out, took only one community college economics course, which he barely passed, and it reveals that he still hasn't been telling the truth about his college degree. What it shows is the level of deception that he's willing to participate in order to get elected to the United States Congress, and that's disturbing, said Randy Stamps, former political director for the Tennessee Republican Party and a former GOP legislator himself. That's interesting. News Channel 5's investigation of Andy Ogles' embellishments about his resume recently went national, including his repeated claims as a candidate and as a new member of Congress to be a trained economist. His congressional bio says Ogles graduated from Middle Tennessee State University, where he studied policy and economics. That's a quote from his website. Yet our investigation dug up a 2009 resume where he listed a degree in international relations, not economics, minoring in psychology and English. Going on Nashville Talk Radio for Damage Control, Ogles, who was one of the 20 House holdouts in Kevin McCarthy's speaker election, insisted economics was part of his international relations degree at MTSU, but not that he's an economist. That's not the same thing. It's a requirement for graduation, sure. But Ogles claimed he put a block on the university confirming his academic credentials because he was worried about his identity being stolen. I would encourage anyone to lock down your transcripts. Maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. Lock down your credit so you're not the victim of an identity theft, Ogles told WWTN host Dan Mandis. But now, News Channel 5 Investigates has uncovered what Congressman Ogles didn't want you to see, his college transcript. The transcript, submitted by Ogles with a job application more than a decade ago, shows his major wasn't in economics nor in international relations, but in, oh boy, they're going to love this one for the deep meaning of the word, liberal studies. It's a type of degree generally for those who can't settle on a major. I can understand that. Like we say, studying the liberal arts. But how funny, liberal studies. And contrary to Ogles' claims, the transcript shows he enrolled in just one economics class, a community college Principles of Economics course. That's a good course to take. It's a wise idea. Of course, he got a C, which, okay, economics is not easy for everyone. But that doesn't make you an economist, of course. He was also forced to take developmental level intermediate algebra, essentially the high school course, where he got a B, Then he was allowed to enroll in college algebra. The grade he got there, also a C. Taking one course where you are a freshman or sophomore in college does not make you an economist, Stamps said. And if he's willing to run around and say, hey, I'm an economist, who knows what else he's going to tell you that's not true. And one of the things, of course, if you're going to say you're a trained economist, presumably you're proficient at higher math than high school algebra. Anyway, last fall, Stamps broke with his party, supporting Ogles' Democratic opponent, State Senator Heidi Campbell. Even before the election, I didn't believe anything he said, Stamps said. News Channel 5 asked the former Republican lawmaker, does this reflect why you endorsed his Democratic opponent? Absolutely. With all due respect, I kind of saw this coming, that he was going to embarrass our state. Ogles' transcript shows he got a C in American history as well, although he did pass a total of 9 political science courses in the 17 years that it took him to complete his degree. Okay, that's a little longer than usual. But in the fall of 1995, oops, and I'm way behind with our music here, the future congressman enrolled in U.S. presidency, problems in government, political theory, and national security policy, and flunked every one of them. Oh, boy, that's not so good. And 3 years later, in the fall of 1998, it happened again. Finally, in 2007, Ogles went back to college and finished that liberal studies degree with a 2.4 GPA, which, okay, a pass is a pass. So what does the congressman have to say? During last week's congressional break, we went to Ogles' hometown in search of answers, checking out the Columbia address listed on his website as his new congressional office. Then we called and texted, but the freshman Republican ignored our requests for comment. However, in an apparently preemptive move, Ogles released a statement Sunday night to a conservative website, the Tennessee Star, in which he claimed he just learned that his degree was in liberal studies after requesting his official transcript. When I pulled my transcript to verify, I realized I was mistaken, Ogles said in a statement. I apologize for my misstatement. Now I'd like to know what his degree actually says, because he's been flashing one that says international relations on it, and now I wonder if it was just plain photoshopped or what. He blamed his failing grades on an interfamilial matter, that sometimes happens, that forced him to drop out of college and return home to financially support my family during a difficult time. Can't fault you for that, but it certainly don't look too good.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Now, of course, time for you to listen to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's he got on tap for you today? Well, let's see. More on the Fox Dominion suit. Let's jump down to here. Troops who refuse the COVID vaccine may still face military discipline. I guess the trial's not over for them. More about that and more next.